Do you feel like you're designed to do something creative? However, this fear, this shame kind of creeps in it when you think about this being a little too superficial, something that is good enough or godly enough because you think that it's not financially sustainable? Well, in this video, I'm sharing 3 things that absolutely changed everything for me, leading me to start a women's international print magazine, coaching thousands of creative women across the globe, and most importantly, getting to know a radically, deliciously creative God. For years, I thought that my dreams were clearly not from God. I mean, I've always had such a bent toward color, creativity, art, style. Did I mention color? A lot of color. And there was just something that drew me to everything that was aesthetic. I just always assumed that must be, in fact, superficial. Not what matters, not the substance, not the real stuff, not the life-changing stuff. And so this was one of the greatest things that often hindered me, how God designed me, the very fabric of my design. At the time, that creative shame led me to believe that maybe I needed to do something that was more necessary to day-to-day life. I was ignoring that there was maybe a different definition of necessary that came from God's dictionary and not my own. And this is when I started to apply this guidepost, this scripture, Romans 12:2, where it tells us not to conform to the patterns or the ways of this world. Now, if I can tell you, this has been one of the most life-changing scriptures to me, which I apply to everything, almost as if it was a magnifying glass. The things that I'm doing, to the ways in which I'm organizing my schedule, to the way that I parent, to the way that I run my life, just all the things, because when things start to feel really intense, really heavy, like a lot of friction in my life, I recognize that there's something that's a little off kilter and that somehow I am not necessarily doing things maybe the way that God has designed them, but somehow along the way I've adopted some other way of living that maybe is a worldly way versus God's way of living. Is this something that God has asked me to do, or is this a way that God intended for us to live? So I started to think, how did I start to feel so deflated to dedicate most of my life to creating? Where did I get these beliefs that this was somehow shameful? I started to ask myself, where did I get this idea that is not from God, or that somehow this is superficial? I started to get really curious rather than just shaming myself, although I did shame myself quite a lot. So that's when I started to do a little bit of digging, a little bit of researching in there, like, what do we see in scripture? What does God really say about this? And it turns out that the devaluation of creative careers actually started with many historical events. Practical work started taking a higher value than any creative expression. And we started associating moral worth to that of tangible labor, those things that could be measured, those things that could be quantified. The greatest form of measurement was productivity. How is this time equaling this amount of money? And that was pretty much the formula through which we started to see value, morality, and worth. And we started to see economic output as way more important than mental, emotional, spiritual, or even cultural enrichment. And then guidance counselors and parents started encouraging young adults to really pursue these more stable careers. Sound familiar? Things like law and medicine and business. Now, as you can imagine, this brought huge psychological effects, which we are still experiencing today, myself included. Creative people started doubting the legitimacy of their work, and therefore they started going in these anxious spirals, questioning what they were to do, how they were to do it, what they were even here to do. And then, of course, enter depression, anxiety, and many of the other existential crises that can come from this unknowing. It's like being a sea lion and being expected to fly. And if you don't fly, by the way, you're not good enough, because being above is higher than being below, just elevation-wise. Of course, you're going to feel crazy and inadequate. And that was 100% me for the majority of my life, as long as I can remember. That was until I came across this weird little guy named Bezalel in Exodus 31 of the Old Testament. And he started to debunk maybe one of the biggest lies that I was believing most of my life and most other creative people I know. And the scripture reads, "Then the Lord said to Moses, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all the kinds of skills to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of crafts." The first realization I had that changed Every aspect of my perspective is that creative work is essential. It's not a fringe afterthought. Now here's the setup. In the scripture that we just read, Moses just got downloaded the 10 commandments, and now God says, I need a creative director to lead this whole interior design project. Enter Bezalel. He's not some priest. He's not some spiritual celebrity. He's not some businessman. He's not some kind of political leader. He is just a craftsman who is really good at doing artistic things. So when God needed to hire someone to do the most important creative work in history, the greatest architectural project, he didn't hire someone based on a spiritual resume. He hired someone based on a talent that he had deposited already within. And the most important and powerful part, this is the first account of someone in scripture ever being filled with the Spirit of God. It wasn't Moses parting seas. It wasn't Abraham. It was Bezalel. That doesn't sound so unimportant. Bezalel was just doing his thing. And guess what? That's what qualified him. Pure and simple. Now, here's the issue. We often get really stuck and scared because we're like, okay, great. So I've got a thing I love to do. What about provision? I get it. Unlike some of the other professional fields like medicine or law, where somebody's work, regardless of how it's evaluated, it's compensated, and there's a sense of security. When it comes to the creative careers, there's really a different sense of exchange where there's a little bit of contingency on whoever is going to receive the work. Do they like it? Do they think it's worth it? And it's really based on opinion. Now, here's why this is dangerous to the creative person who is not settled on the fact that this is a God assignment, is that then this can become a threat to our very survival. Because if somebody doesn't like your work, you don't eat. But here's what I want to encourage us to realize, that any responsibility that God gives us comes with a resource. Every assignment comes with an allotment. It's just common sense. God is not crazy. If he sends you to do something, doesn't it make sense that he would give you what you need to go do that thing? It is actually in God's best interest that he would provide for you everything that you need so that your worry wouldn't be placed on how you're going to make ends meet, but that you would actually focus on the work at hand. Because if you're focusing all of your energy on how you're going to pay bills and how this is going to turn out, you can't possibly give your everything to whatever it is that you're creating and what's right in front of you. Now, the next realization is that creative work is actually worship. About 85% of Jesus' adult life was literally spent creating and doing work with his hands. And while he was doing that, do you think that for 1 second he didn't consider that an act of worship? By the way, I personally believe if Jesus were around today, he would be featured in West Elm's latest mahogany collections. That's just my thought. Now, here's the thing about Bezalel's assignment. It wasn't just an interior design project. He was building a blueprint for how creative work was designed to be done, that we would commune and co-create with God through the entire process. Dr. Robin Harridge in London found that creative insights and mystical experiences both involved a decreased activity in the brain region associated with self-reference and the ego boundaries. Now, what this suggests is that creativity literally starts to dissolve when barriers between ourselves and something transcendent happens, which Dr. Mario Brigard calls the God spot. While we are creating, if we are fully immersed, we start to literally dissolve the sense of self, start to dissolve the sense of ego, and we literally become one with God. This is what he had in mind. Now think about this. Every time that you design anything, a piece of clothing, you're putting together a beautiful dish, you are writing poetry, this is not secular work. You are literally participating and channeling the very DNA of the God who created the entire universe. How do I even wrap my head around that? I had a lot of trouble with that as well. So because of that, I put together a free little resource called the Intentional Life Bundle that you can download below, and it'll help you just kind of walk through some of these mental, emotional exercises that'll help you connect with really what it is that you are engaging in when you are creating. All right, so that leads me right into my last point, which is that creativity is divine inheritance. In his opening act to humanity, what God first reveals about himself is his creative spirit and his creative attributes. Now, think about all the seemingly useless things that are all around us. Like, why do we need to have so many birds? Why so many species of fish? Why so many different types of plants? Why do peacocks need to have such elaborate feathers? For fun, for mere delight. This is something that God places in a high position in his esteem. So as I was thinking about all these things and ruminating in this like emotional vomit, all the insecurity and all the narratives consuming my ideas about creativity, and I just really felt God stop me and literally ask me in my heart, who are you to shame and disqualify your creative inheritance? I've given you a piece of me. I've given you attributes of myself that you now inherit, that you now appropriate. Who are you to now disqualify these things? I gotta tell you, from this moment, I got the wind knocked out of me. And while I will still backslide once in a while and still kind of shrink back to some insecurities, I will tell you that this question that God planted will never leave me. And every time that I try to shrink back from anything creative, I just think immediately, this is God's inheritance. This is God's attribute. Who am I to shame it, to disqualify it, to minimize it, and to put it away? We believe that anything we create is somehow us. Like we are exposing ourselves. And therefore, if somebody rejects what we put out, then they are literally rejecting us. We need to put creativity back on the table like we would with any of these stable careers that we talked about previously. If you don't like the guidelines of the medical field, the doctor's not offended if you don't like it because he literally didn't make them. He doesn't really care. He's just part of the system. So in the same way, we can take creativity and realize that this is not technically ours. It really belongs to God. We're just a channel for that expression. So if someone were to come and reject the work, it's like, guess what? Take it up with Papa, because that ain't mine. It basically comes from God's headquarters and not from our stroke of genius. But if we're really honest, a lot of times we prefer, just no matter what, to follow status quos instead of exercising this God image attribute that we've been given. God has given us so much agency so that we would mirror his character in having choice and therefore exercising creativity. Is he speaking directly to your heart and he's saying, baby, you need to move on this because I put this in you and this is literally something that you're just allowing to rot inside of you when it's actually designed to bless so many other people, including yourself as the conduit. Now, in my next video, I'll be talking about why we do this and how to finally free ourselves from this soul-sucking feedback loop. Now, let me know in the comments which of these 3 points resonated the most with you. And if you found this video helpful, would you consider subscribing and giving it a little thumbs up if you learned something today? And if you want to dive deeper with me and other creative women who are wanting to have real conversations about these things and learn how to really unbind ourselves from so many of these social structures, then consider joining our Delicious Life community that I'm going to link below. And as always, beautiful, it is an honor to serve you. Mwah.